Hi, my name is Matthew van der Horn. Some of you who know me from the ICS server will know me as Mr. Horn. I'm an aspiring learning expert, which is also in my Discord username. I aspire to change the entire education system starting in the Netherlands and not change very loosely, but completely transform it into an optimized state of education. um, yeah, that's really my life mission, my life purpose. That's also why I'm reading a lot of science and books and all sorts of that. From advice I got from a few people that I know, and also other YouTubers that I find, I have decided to document my progress towards certain goals. I will not share everything, but from now on, I will most likely do once in a while. I will. Create a video of myself and explain to you the knowledge I got from certain readings and stuff like that. This is a way for me to one, verify my knowledge and gather feedback. Two, to make a name online, uh, be it slightly, because I won't be very professional, I think, in my video editing and video uploading skills, at least at first. And the third purpose, which is debatably the most important one, is that it will gain me credibility when I want to implement my theory of everything concerning education in 30 years. So yeah, that. And today I'm going to start with the explanation of what I found useful out of the really wonderful book, Make It Stick, by Peter C. Brown, Henry L. Rudiger III, and someone else whose name I did not remember because I don't know that person. Yeah, that will be the planning for today. I have to warn you that I have multiple monitors set up, of which an ultra wide screen is in the center, which means that it doesn't have a webcam, um, resulting in the fact that when I am going to explain, I you will see like the side of my face, because then I will be like this. So yeah, that's that's a thing, but I can't do anything about it right now. And of course, like I said, the video quality won't be very professional, at least not at first. When I get some income next year, hopefully, due to my ideas for the study institute, which I won't share right now because it's still in the pre-initial phases. um, yeah, when that's going off, I might get a very high income, and based on that, I will of course professionalize certain things. So yeah, that's that. By the way, it's also worth mentioning that I read Make It Stick within 3 days. I can speed read. I think I spent a total of 2 hours and 30 to 40 minutes on it. I can speed read. I speed read most normal books. Through science, I usually cannot speed read, and speed reading in itself does not give a greater comprehension or retention. It does give more focus. It is recommended, at least I recommend it, when you have a solid foundation as a learning system. Uh, but you shouldn't do it to learn more, because, like I said, speed reading in itself doesn't result in better or more learning. So you should not use it as a standalone thing. Furthermore, it is possible that I miss a few concepts in my explanation of this video, because I did not deem everything the authors talked about relevant to the purposes that I have myself or for this video. So, just so you know. Okay, so due to a rookie mistake in fucking video recording, I accidentally recorded the entire freaking video with just my head instead of the chunk map. So what I'm going to do, I'm not going to record the entire video again. That's too much work because it took me half an hour. What I will be doing is I will be showing a static image of my freaking chunk map, and I will put what I explained on top of that as audio, so it won't be as interactive as it was before. I won't be making the mind map again on video, thus. uh, Unlike my past self is going to tell you. But yeah, it is as it is. And next video, I'll be sure to pay more attention to this. Right. So essentially, Make It Stick the authors argue that there are 3 stages to learning, 3 main stages, which are encoding, consolidation, and recall, where encoding is the process of gathering new information and putting it from our working memory into our long-term memory. This is not specifically explained in Make It Stick, I think, but it is what I know from other readings I did, such as Cognitive Load Theory, which is written in 2011 by John Sweller, and some more authors. But that's a scientific book, and I will not include everything I know into one single video, but sometimes I find things that are relating that are useful to explain in relation to what the subject of the video is. So that's why I sometimes state certain things. So yeah, encoding is the process of transferring information from our working memory into our long-term memory. Then consolidation is what our brain does in order to make those changes in our brain persist, to make those synaptic changes persist. I'm not a neuroscientist, so I won't go very deep into how that goes. Recall is using the information we have in our brain to do certain things. Recall, this is also part of neuroplasticity, of course, also initiates a new encoding process. So essentially, when you recall something, you re-encode the process, the information into your brain, which actually strengthens the information. If this is information you misremembered, you will be more likely to have to make the same mistake later, or have the faulty knowledge in your head. This goes alongside context, which means that sometimes when you recall something, you also get new retrieval cues, which we'll go into later. These are the main concepts, which is also why I made it red. So yeah, back to the content. Encoding essentially takes into account principles and methods. As far as I know, the only real principle that the authors in Make It Stick talked about really is the process, the concept of desired difficulty. This essentially refers to the fact that we should embrace difficulty. If our learning process is too easy, it's most likely that we're not doing enough learning, that we're actually not learning, not very effectively at least, usually not at all. What we want learning processes that engage us, that are harder for ourselves to do, which actually increases our learning and our ability to have long-term retention. How we'll achieve this is something we'll go into later in this video, but also in future videos, of course. Yeah, this has to do with what I know from cognitive load theory, which is that we should take into account the limits of our working memory in order to optimize our learning efficiency. And essentially, when things are more difficult, they cost us more working memory, but depending on how we do it, it's optimized intrinsic cognitive load, which is a term you are allowed to forget, but that essentially means that we use more of our working memory resources to devote to actually learn. And I probably have misformulated the sentence, but you get the point. Methods to encode and to take into account the desired difficulty are elaboration. You have to keep in mind that I also only will really explain what is in the content of the actual book. So I know more methods, but I will not explain them because they're not relevant to the book I'm processing. So elaboration, which essentially means that you link new content, the information that you're learning right now, you are relating it to old information into your head, mutating what is known as a cognitive or mental schema, and thereby gaining a deeper understanding. It's a really powerful method to learn, and it really induces a higher cognitive load, which means it's harder to do. And it also gives you usually more retrieval cues, which means that you're more likely be able to remember it, because retrieval cues essentially are, well, associations between certain concepts or informations, not informations, that's not the word, and they allow your mind actually to go through the neural pathways in order to get the information you require, which means if you have only one retrieval queue for information, it's very likely you will forget the information. Forgetting actually doesn't mean that you don't have the memory anymore, usually. It just means that your mind is unable to retrieve the item, which is usually due to the fact that you do not have enough retrieval queues, or that your retrieval queues are not strengthened enough. Furthermore, in order to gain desired difficulty, what you want to do is gain a structural knowledge instead of a surface knowledge. I do have some drawings here in my original mind map, but I won't show that right now. I showed it at the end of the video, and it takes too much time to really draw something right now during the video, especially because I don't have that much drawing skills digitally. So for that reason I will just write the words. Usually in a chunk map you should draw items, but I won't go into the reason for that now. If you want to know more about chunk maps and learning in general, I highly recommend to watch Dr. Justin Sun. Alright, so structural knowledge versus surface knowledge. Structural knowledge is means to get at desired difficulty. Structural knowledge means you get a deep understanding due to deep processing. Surface knowledge, in contrast, as shallow understanding and shallow processing. Structural knowledge is usually generalized, and surface knowledge is concrete most of the times, which also means that structural knowledge is transfer optimized. Don't mind my bad handwriting skills. I will improve on this in the future, trust me. But transfer optimized essentially means that you are able to use the information you are now learning in new and multiple contexts. This is essentially what you want when you learn something, because in most of the cases you don't want to learn information just in one case. And of course, in surface knowledge, therefore, it's the contrasted against structural knowledge, which means it's a single case. I have to wrap that in quotes actually, because it's not entirely one single case, but it resembles it. Structural knowledge refers to logic and concepts, which is why most students struggle with this, because they're not actually taught how to learn concepts. And that's something out of the scope of this video, probably. Again, watch Dr. Justin Sun. And surface knowledge refers to details, usually. Some of these details are important and can actually provide a better understanding of said concepts. But in most of the cases, 80% of details are actually redundant for you, and you just have to learn them because it's on the test. And then you should use memorization, but that's also for later. Structural knowledge results in being smart. Surface knowledge results in feeling smart. Essentially, being smart is that you are really smart. You usually feel dumb though, in the process. Afterwards, of course, you don't feel very dumb, I think. Feeling smart essentially means that you feel smart, that you think you have a real great understanding, but that you actually don't. Which is why feeling smart and being dumb results in what is known in psychology as the Dunning-Kruger effect. Dunning-Kruger essentially states that when someone has the least knowledge on the 4 levels of competency, I think by Maslow or something, it's the unconscious incompetence stage. yeah, when you are in that stage, usually in like 90% of the case of some 90% of the cases or something. I have not read the actual research, but this is what I can guess based on logic. You have the most confidence, which means you can get into a lot of really gnarly situations and are actually almost having a fixed mindset because you see no opportunity to growth because you think you know it all. So you should really avoid Dunning-Kruger, and there are things we can do about that for that, but that's also for later. Yeah, one thing that is essential for this, it's already the time, is deliberate practice. A term coined by, I think, Eric Anderson, from the top of my head. Deliberate practice actually refers to always analyzing what you already know and what you don't already know. So you need to identify what is the point that I'm weakest on. That's why it's resulting in a structural knowledge, not necessarily a structural knowledge, but essentially being smart. Deliberate practice refers to identifying thus what you are not good at yet and actually drilling that and actually focusing on that. The stuff you are not good at yet, you want to focus on that. The stuff you are already good at, you want to let go, or at least for the moment being. This is why surface knowledge without deliberate practice thus results in the situation of feeling smart because you are always busy with what you are already good at. It's also why it doesn't result in much growth. Furthermore, it's also why structural knowledge, or deep knowledge, actually, deep and shallow knowledge are most likely not entirely the same as structural knowledge and surface knowledge, but they're very highly correlated, which is why I contrasted them, because structural knowledge results in a deep understanding and surface knowledge results in a shallow understanding. Yeah, where was I? Yeah, that's why also why in when you have deeply processed something and you have a deep knowledge, in the process you feel dumb because you're always busy with things you're not good at yet. But that actually results in the most growth, which is also why a principle of quality in coding is desired difficulty, because you always want to be busy with something you're not good at yet. But being smart also has a downside, potentially, which is what psychologists call, I think, or it's at least commonly known, as the curse of knowledge, which means that you have such a deep, profound knowledge using a method or the principle of chunking, which is beyond the scope of this video. But essentially, you have a deep structural understanding, which means that you put away the details. And sometimes when you are teaching something, you forget that certain knowledge is not known by the person you're teaching, which is why what you're teaching is sometimes too complicated for them. But you cannot, because of the expertise you have, you cannot even imagine why it is hard for them, because it has been either so long ago or you have too much knowledge for that. That is why it's known as the curse of knowledge. One thing I would suggest, if you really want to teach and want to avoid this problem while gaining a lot of mastery, is to keep an index or of components necessary to reach the understanding you have reached, or to keep a log of what you learn when. That way, when you are teaching someone who is below you, you can identify where they're at and easily adapt your teachings. Let me erase this little dot. Excellent. Yeah. The authors of Make It Stick argue that the first thing to get done is gain a deep structural knowledge, which thus means to identify what is the core logic and the core concepts of the thing you're learning, and spending most of the time on that. Like 30%, 70% of your time should be in the logic and concepts, because following the Pareto principle, 20% of the material, which is the logic and concepts, results in 80% of the output. that should also be on tests, but in high school that is usually not the case. So you need to spend also around 70%, 80% of your time learning and mastering the logic and the concepts of what you're learning. And the rest of the time, like 30%, should be spent on the details. Because the details can be memorized using memorization techniques. One of them, give me 1 sec to write up. One of these techniques is the method of Loki. It's very ancient, dating back to ancient Rome and Greece. I won't go into very much detail on this. If you really want a profound knowledge of this, you can watch one of Justin Sung's videos on this, which I might link in the description if I don't forget. Or read the book Moonwalking with Einstein by Joshua Foer, which is not a really profound book if you really want to know how to learn or how to memorize. There are certain techniques in there you can get out of it, but it's more an account of Joshua Foer's journey from being a normal journalist to the US memory champion in 1 year time. So it's more a biographical type of book. But essentially the method of Loki means that the information you're learning, you are associating it with pictures and locations, meaning that you imagine the picture of the information in your head on a location you are deeply familiar with in a certain order, if you need an order for certain lists. And then when you want to recall the information, you just mentally walk through that memory palace, or that location. It's commonly referred to as a memory palace, and just walk in the same order, and you'll decode the pictures back into the original information. It takes some time to set up because 1, you need to have a place you're deeply familiar with, and 2, you need to know the pictures, like the parsing by heart, meaning that you need to know the rules for coding and decoding the information into pictures and back. Let's see. Yeah, that really is the. Sorry, let me take one break. That really is the crux of encoding. And one thing I'll add, from my knowledge, which I learned from a highly recommended book called The Forgetting Machine by Rodrigo Quiroga, and it is that structural knowledge results in a deeper mastery for the simple fact that our minds are built for generalization and not for concretion. The definition of intelligence relies in our ability to abstractly conceptualize, and this is true because our mind or our brain receives on average per week 500 gigabytes of data, if you would really give it a number. But at the end of our lives, only 125 megabyte remains. This seems very, very inefficient, but I would argue that it's extremely efficient, because with that 125 megabytes of highly abstract data or highly generalized information, we can do everything we want, or we do in life. So when you think about it that way, generalized knowledge results in way more capabilities and abilities to do certain things. Alright, onto consolidation. I don't have very much to say on this, except because I'm not a neuroscientist, except what I know that make it stick refer to, which is that a consolidation can take anywhere from a few minutes to a few hours, and even a few days, I think, maybe even more. But it's also caused by sleep. During the rapid eye movement state of your sleep, I don't know if this is explicitly talked about in Make It Stick, but it's something I know because I've read it before, which is commonly referred to as a REM state. Your mind is actually going through memories you have made before, or information, which is also why dreams often look like scenarios you have actually experienced, Why? Because dreaming is what happens during the REM state. But during the REM state, it is suspected, or it is proven, I'm not sure, I've not done much research on it yet. During the REM state, your brain actually consolidates the information and strengthens the synapses made. But I can't go into much detail about this because I'm not a neuroscientist yet. And I could have mistakenly said some information here, but you get the point. Okay, that was consolidation. Then to recall is done through essentially, or its purpose in this case, in Make It Stick, is either self or normal testing. The principles here are, let's see, Here again we have principles, which is interleaving. Yeah, alright, so interleaving refers to the ability to, if I have it correct, interleaving, yeah. The possibility is here that I am confusing interleaving and varied practice in terms of definitions of Make It Stick, but it doesn't matter because it's of course about the content itself, and they are both principles you should use. So anyway, in my understanding, interleaving refers to the mixing of certain subjects and skills inside what you're learning. Yeah, okay. So interleaving refers to mixing up subjects or subcomponents of the subject you're learning in order to pick up more of the nuances and thus generalize. I cannot really find a great example on the fly here, so you should do some Googling into that yourself. Varied practice refers to, it's similar to interleaving, it refers to using the information in multiple angles, from multiple angles. Again, Justin Sung also has videos about this. Varied practice is, for example, using multiple methods in multiple scenarios multiple times a day to learn or recall the information. So, for example, using it to problem solve, studying a worked example, etc., etc., and that is varied practice. And this is what you should do very often. Spacing refers to actually spacing the practice and not cramming before an exam or something, because when you space, it essentially interrupts the Ebbinghaus curve, or also known as the forgetting curve. And it results in the fact that if you have forgotten around 10 to 20% of the information, when you recall, you actually consolidate the information more powerfully, so it's remembered more strongly, which means that it increases the retention span. Or in other words, when you space your practice, you increase the you have a longer retention. Ideally, you should space it more often. So if you're learning something, now I'm talking about like flashcards and details. At first, you should maybe repeat it the next day, then 2 days after that, then 3 days after that, then 7 days after that, etc., etc. Unless you make a mistake, then you should review it more often. And of course, this is also true for concepts which you don't study using flashcards. This is not talked about in Make It Stick. But the thing about the Ebbinghaus curve, which is the initial days I just said, the thing about it is it doesn't take into account how well the information is encoded. So if you have encoded concepts and logic, or concepts very well, using logic, you actually remember it very well, which means you don't need to review it very often from the start. Which is also why I don't like the fact that people over-rely, in my own words, on flashcards and spaced repetition. Because the thing is, you cannot recall something if it's not already in your mind. So you should optimize your encoding process before you optimize your recalling process. With that out of the way, there are certain methods you could use to revise, and I will only list the methods that Make It Stick itself talked about. I know a lot more again. One of those methods is free recall. An example of this is something like the Feynman method. Free recall essentially means you don't get cues, so you just write it down from memory. And the Feynman method is really the best example of it I can find. There's not much to be said about free recall. Practice papers is another one. They said this is cued recall, in fact, but it also gives you immediate feedback, so that's also why practice papers are a good thing to do. And what they talk about, which is arguably very important, is reflection. Reflection is a process of recalling information depending on how you use it, but it also results in something that we should do to gain the structural knowledge, or not necessarily structural knowledge, it is included, but deep knowledge. And that is deliberate analysis. I don't know if I spelled this right. I get the point. Deliberate analysis which uses a process of reflection, reflecting on the information you did, or the technique you did, or the information you're learning, and this is what results in identifying your gaps of knowledge and what you're not good at yet. This can be done by all these three methods, but reflection especially is powerful for this because it really gives you also the idea why you did something you did. Deliberate analysis also results in the fact that you can switch between automation, which is the goal of learning, is to do something without thinking about it, which is on Maslow's 4 levels of competency, the unconscious competence section, which takes a huge amount of practice. It's essentially rule-based instead of concept-based. So you can, using deliberate analysis, you actually switch between automation and growth, because growth requires the identification process, which is done through reflection. Yeah, those were the methods that Make It Stick talked about. Self-testing, as briefly stated before, results in feedback, be it corrective or not. Corrective feedback is, of course, what we should be seeking, which is also why a mentor or a teacher is very beneficial, because corrective feedback essentially speeds up the entire learning process, because you don't have to figure things out by yourself due to a manner of reflection. Let's see. And this all results in a process of deliberate practice and the usage of a growth mindset. So, a growth mindset essentially refers to, let me first pick this. A growth mindset essentially refers to seeking the desired difficulties and always being busy with stuff you don't know yet. Challenging yourself. If you don't challenge yourself, you will not learn and grow. Yeah. So using those methods and being constantly in an analyzation process. Now, after one more drink. Now I will show you my pre-made mind map, which is a lot more clean, more elegant. That's here. And essentially, to do a little bit of reflection here, I'm not a master at chunk mapping yet, so I will always like feedback on this. Destroy me. destroy my work. But to do a little bit of reflection, what I think I have done not right at this chunk map yet is I have not made proper use of images. I have used a few here and there, but I think I could have been using more, which enhances my retention and learning. But I won't go into the details of why this is the case right now. And that was essentially what I learned. Oh my god. That is essentially what I learned from Make It Stick.